Hello, everyone. I'm Keith Price. I'm the Industry Relations Director here at the AUA, and thank you all for joining us at our AUA Industry Insider Town Hall. I'm pleased to introduce AUA Secretary Dr. David Penson, who will be discussing new ways to share your clinical trials in progress at AUA 2024. I'll be joined by my colleague, Melissa Goodman, behind the scenes here, answering any questions you may have. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat, and then we will bring them back up at the end. Dr. Penson, after he goes through his presentation, and we'll have that open discussion. So thank you very much for joining, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Penson.
So my name is David Penson. I am the Secretary of the AUA. It is I'm in my first year of a 4-year term, and one of the things that I really am excited about is trying to get the annual meeting to highlight really important new clinical trial data. I've always felt that urology doesn't do enough randomized clinical trials, doesn't do enough clinical trials to drive our practice. And one of the reasons I think that is because we really need to highlight it more at the annual meeting. And so one of my goals as the incoming secretary has always been to try to figure out ways to get great clinical research, clinical trials highlighted at the AUA so that the information reaches the largest audience possible. Remember that the AUA meeting is the largest urology meeting in the world. And so it's a great pulpit to get data out there. And so we really have 2 programs that we put in this year, which I think are going to be, I hope, really impactful and really start to get the urologic community thinking about clinical trials more, and importantly, get important clinical trials about new drugs, new therapies, new innovations out to the urologic community quicker. The first one is what we call the P2 program. That stands for Paradigm Shifting, Practice Changing Clinical Trials in Urology. And this is actually has replaced our late breaking abstract mechanism. The reason we did that was because we were getting a lot of abstracts in the LBA, which really weren't important enough to warrant being quote unquote late breaking. And so I thought it was very important that we really focus what we wanted with that late deadline. And what we want research and trials which are really going to move the needle, that are going to affect the day-to-day urology of practice, things that your average urologist really needs to know about. And one of the things that was important was making sure those data were presented in the most high-profile spot possible, which is the big room, the plenary stage. So we have now opened the submission site for our P2 abstracts, and some of you may have already seen this, and some of you may have submitted these abstracts. These abstracts are going to be in the big room. We've put aside time on Friday and on Saturday to present these studies. They are high-profile studies designed to showcase the exceptional groundbreaking work that you're doing that is going to change the day-to-day practice of urology. So if you have an ongoing clinical trial that is going to report out, or perhaps you have an ongoing clinical trial that has important preliminary data, you haven't completely finished accrual, but you have enough preliminary data to make a statement, and you want to get that out there, this is the place to submit it. And the abstract submission site closes on February 15th. It's open right now, and I would encourage you to take a look at that. Now, what are the sort of studies that we want? We want studies that address scientific questions of particular interest to urologists and studies that are producing primary data. So I don't really want, registry studies here, SEER studies, but that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for studies of new agents, new technologies, or perhaps existing technologies or drugs used in a new way. Optimally, this is going to be in a randomized clinical trial design, a phase 2 or a phase 3 study. Think of this as the right place to put a phase 3 study that's going to be very impactful for urologists. So, I get it. If you're a cancer investigator or a cancer company and you have a cytotoxic agent that applies to GU malignancies but is given by a medical oncologist, maybe this is not where you want to put this. But if you have a intravesical agent, for example, or an intravesical delivery system, and I'm speaking to people specifically on this call that's going to be put in and taken out by urologists, and urologists are the ones who are going to be making the decisions to put this in. This is the place to put this because you're going to get this out to the largest group of urologists you possibly could. So RCTs are great. I also am really open to the idea of prospective observational cohorts that compare therapies or highlight novel and high impact interventions that will change clinical practice. I would rather have a randomized clinical trial for sure, but I understand that's not always feasible. We will take meaningful single arm studies here. This is going to be peer reviewed, so it's really got to be meaningful. But in the end, that's the sort of study we want, either prospective observational cohorts or optimally RCTs. Retrospective studies, basic science studies, meta-analyses, survey research, case series, case reports, not appropriate here. The other point I'll make, so some of you may have mentioned, oh, I presented this was presented at ESMO, this was presented at AUA2024. Can we do an encore presentation? The answer is no. We want new stuff here. That being said, if you have a trial that was presented, say, at AUA2024, and you have a subgroup analysis of a certain group of patients, which is very meaningful and is going to make a difference to urologists, yes, we'll definitely look at that and consider it seriously. So I don't want you to be put off, but I don't want repeat abstracts here either. What are the requirements for the abstracts? They should present prospective original research studies that highlight novel and high impact findings with practice-changing implications. It's a standard abstract design. The body has to be informative and detailed, should have introduction and objectives, methods, results, and conclusions. Again, the abstract has to be submitted by February 15th, and it should contain the final data set and analyses if possible. And I think that's a key point, if possible. Now, why do I say that? I've worked on trials like this before. I've worked with industry specifically on trials, and I understand that often the final data cut is not going to be done for an April or for a May meeting in February. Accept that. So there are going to be cases when the final data analysis cannot be completed by February 15th, but you know it will be done by the annual meeting. We recognize that, particularly in the case of large phase 3 studies. If you're going to the FDA for a registration study, you may not be ready to, present those data 2 months before the meeting. So the analysis may not be completed by the abstract deadline. In that case, we're willing to accept what I would call a placeholder or a shell abstract. So what does that mean? You're going to have a lot of information in that abstract. You're going to have the study design, the outcome metrics, what you expect to report on, and you can submit that. But I'm going to expect that the abstract containing the final data set and analyses will be submitted 2 weeks before the meeting, and that all the analyses will be presented at the annual meeting. Now, if you're doing this, during submission, you're going to be required to enter all the authors and their disclosures, the background and method sections, and provide the primary clinical endpoint for analyses, the type of analyses, the date of the planned analyses, and the planned statistical methods. So you should already have a lot of that stuff in there, just not the final numbers. So if you're going to put in a shell abstract, the first author has to submit that, completing all the steps, with the exception of the results and conclusion sections, by the abstract submission deadline. Describe the type of data that will be submitted by the P2 submission deadline, indicating the primary clinical endpoint for analyses, the planned statistical plan for analyses, and the date of analyses. And I really want you, if you're going to put in a shell, to reach out to us. Contact us through the email, speakers@auanet.org, and I'll probably want to give you a call and discuss it a little bit more so I understand what's coming. All right. You're going to know whether or not the study's going to be, positive or negative. Obviously a negative study is not as impactful as a positive study. And so, and I recognize that you're not going to be able to give details, but we'll want to know a little bit about what's coming down the pike, just so we can make sure it has the right venue, the right press, all those things. And if you look, we've done this in the past. We did this last year with the Embark trial, which Neil Shore presented. And that was a very important trial, looking at enzalutamide in men with biochemical recurrence, and very impactful for urologists. And we didn't have the data by the end of by the deadline for the late breaking abstract. And we worked with Neil and the industry sponsor to get that abstract there, knowing it was going to be a positive study, but not knowing all the details, and helping them to make sure they got great exposure and getting it to a large audience. So that's the P2 abstract mechanism. My hope is, honestly, with the P2s, that when you think about putting in a trial, submitting your results, and I'm a cancer doctor, so I think of cancer, but obviously for benign disease as well. I don't want you sending these things to ESMO or GU ASCO or Big ASCO or even the subspecialty societies in urology if the product's going to be used, if the agent's going to be used primarily by urologists. I want you to send this to the largest urology meeting in the world. And I want us to present it here in the big room and help you get this to the largest audience possible and help you get the publicity in the media that you deserve for doing a great trial. That's the P2. I'm optimistic this is going to be a great thing for all of us. And it's going to help urology and help get new innovations out into practice quicker. The other piece that I'm excited about is something called our Clinical Trials in Progress program. Now, this year we are having a new venue called our Learning Lab. The Learning Lab is going to be close to the Science and Technology Hall. And importantly, the Learning Lab is going to be a non-CME venue, which means that we have a little bit more latitude to do things a little differently there. That doesn't mean that we're not going to present great stuff there. We have plans to present videos there. We have plans to do some cool programs with young urologists and residents. I think it's going to be a really fun venue, but the highlight of the venue is going to be our Clinical Trials in Progress presentations. This is an innovative new program designed to increase awareness of important clinical trials that are expected to influence practice when they are ultimately reported or published. So these are ongoing trials. One of the things that I've learned during my years of practice is that your rank and file urologist doesn't know what the heck is going on, what's coming down the pike. And so this is an opportunity to get that information out to your urologist who perhaps is not in academic medicine, not in a large group, but who's going to be the person prescribing these meds, doing these techniques when they're finally FDA approved, when they finally get out there. So what sort of trials are we looking for? We're looking for investigators to present ongoing industry-sponsored or investigator-initiated independent studies that are either about to open, so they can be in the final planning stages, they can be accruing patients, or they can be in follow-up but have not reported out primary findings. Think about clinicaltrials.gov. This is sort of a variation on that. To get into this, you're going to submit an abstract. The abstract should describe the trial's purpose, the design and eligibility criteria as much as you know about them. The abstract should not include any results or preliminary data. Of course, if you've got a full cohort and you want to present baseline information about the cohort, that's fine, but I would discourage you from presenting outcomes data here. You'd rather put that into the P2 section anyways. Abstracts are going to be reviewed for their scientific significance, their trial design, potential for collaboration, and relevance to the AUA annual meeting community. And there are going to be submission guidelines on the website. One of the things that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to bring community researchers, academic researchers, urologists who don't do research, industry partners into this space to talk about these trials so that people learn about what's going on. Perhaps the sponsors learn about impediments to enrollment. This is a real opportunity to have an exchange of ideas in a setting where we're not bound by the rules of continuing medical education. The call for abstracts is open now. The submission site closes on February 1st, and we're going to try to send out notifications by February 15th. As I mentioned, it's going to be in the Learning Lab. And one of the things that we're talking about doing, and we haven't sort of set this in stone yet, is to potentially run a research forum alongside or right before the Clinical Trials in Progress, so that people are already there talking about how can we do more clinical trials in urology, involving industry partners, involving academic and community practitioners, involving rank and file urologists and patients as well. So that way we really are getting clinical trials out into the urology community. What's going to be in your abstract here? There's really going to be organized into two sections, a background section and a method section. You have a little bit more latitude here. The requirements, the trial should be registered, open, and enrolling patients. If it's close, we would probably still accept that. But to be perfectly frank with you, I really want trials which are going to happen and not trials which are, well, we had this idea. I'd rather have a trial where, we have this idea, we're almost there, but we're a little worried about, will this accrue or will that accrue? And as I mentioned, the abstract should not contain preliminary data or results. The presentation structure, we're still sort of playing with this a little bit, but what we're starting to envision is that it's going to be in the Learning Lab according to topic category. The presentation will be 10 to 20 minutes in length. And then we're going to have about 10 minutes, which will be open for questions and discussion. And this can include the principal investigator, community researchers, academic researchers, patients, and industry partners as well. The idea is to get a back and forth, a real dialogue. I would like the presenting author to be the principal investigator and someone who's really been involved. And we will ask them to disclose if they have ties to a company, what those ties are. Are they personally receiving payment? Is their institution receiving payment, et cetera? So that's really the two big programs. Again, the goal here is to increase awareness of either completed clinical trials in urology so that the information gets out to patients, or alternatively, things which are in planning, so that this way our community starts to value clinical trials more and really increases evidence-based medicine. And on that, I will gladly take questions, and you can type them in the chat, in the Q&A. I only see one. Hopefully this will be helpful. And if you have other questions that we don't answer today, that's speakers@auanet.org. Email is a great thing to use. So Raj Pruthi asks a question. For P2, will you accept updated patient numbers and longer follow-up of a study presented at a prior meeting? For example, ESMO. The answer is we'll certainly look at it. If someone else has something new and more impactful and I run out of time, well, that may impact things. But Raj, to answer your question, we will, particularly if you're addressing novel questions, sort of secondary analyses. So the answer is yes. Any chance for an extension on the due date? I think the answer is no. You really are in a place where if you're doing a P2, I'm not asking you for data. For a clinical trial in progress, it's probably done already. But no, we can't extend it because we have to plan the program. I'm sorry about that. Other questions? I'm not really seeing any. I'm going to take my slide down here. I'm going to stop sharing and ask if there are any other questions. If not, we'll call it a day and go from there. Keith, anything you want to add?
No, I just want to say thank you for doing this and joining us today. If anyone that's watching this on demand, before we go, we just got a question. How many P2s and clinical trials in progress abstracts will be accepted?
So the short answer is this is a new program, so it really depends on how many are submitted. We've put aside a fair amount of time in the plenary for the P2s. I think we have right now about an hour to hour and a half worth of time over the course of the meeting. We could expand it, we could contract it. So there will be some room here, and it's across numerous different specialties. The clinical trials in progress, we've set aside about 2 hours there. But again, it depends how many are submitted. Will there be focus group type meetings to discuss the topics? No, it's going to be sort of a general forum, Carolyn. I sort of want everyone to be a part of this. Of course, there may be side discussions that occur afterwards. And I hope there are, frankly. I hope that from the clinical trials in progress specifically, that it generates more discussion after the meeting and more collaboration.
All right. Any more questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Or email me.
Or email me. I think that's good, Dr. Penson. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everyone that joined us today. And if you're watching this on demand, you can reach out to me at kprice@auanet.org for any questions, and I'll be sure to direct them to Dr. Penson. But thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you in San Antonio. Have a great day.
Thank you.